Hi everyone, my name is Ankit Jain,
I'm Mira Daya.
and today's podcast we have Vrunda Patel. Vrunda Patel is a recent graduate from UC Irvine, and she graduated with a degree in chemical engineering.
So, we're going to be talking about her experience graduating during a pandemic and what her next steps are and how her journey has gone so far.
So Vrunda, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hey guys, how are you? My name is Vrunda Patel, and I just graduated from UCI with my chemical engineering major with a specialization in energy and environment and a minor in management. So that's a little bit about my educational background. From there, I actually learned a lot about what chemical engineering was. When I got into UCI, I didn't really know that much about chemical engineering, but now that I come out, it's a field that if you want to go into vast industries, try to learn, be able to apply your knowledge in many different ways. That's something that if you want to do that, you should go into chemical engineering as long as you like the critical thinking behind it as well. So I learned my favorite industries through there were process controls and wastewater. I'll definitely dive into that later for you guys. I also love crocheting and making gifts for my friends, making puzzles. Those are some hobbies that I have. Cooking. That's a little bit about myself.
That's
Cool.
all.
It's awesome. I love that you like cooking. But,
I've gotten into cooking now. I didn't know that during college.
yeah, I feel that. So, I guess since we talked a little bit about your educational background, how was COVID impacted like your goals for this year and how you graduated and how you're navigating that?
Yeah, so my goals for this year, I basically wanted to be employed by now, wanted to go into the industry. I was never looking into grad school, as I was exiting college, my bachelor's. But now that everybody's on hiring freezes, managers aren't really getting back to us, it's much, much harder to get into a company because I've heard many stories from many different people. They were about to get a job and then it got retracted because their COVID happened and now they want to go internal instead of external. So I've been hitting a lot of snags. I know though there's still hope. I've heard a lot of my classmates who have gotten jobs and everything as external positions. One of my really close friends just got one down in Riverside, so I know there's hope. I just need to get that straight lightning struck for me. So it's getting a little tougher. So that's why I decided to actually enroll in a master's program, and I recently got accepted. Yeah. Um, and so that's one path that I want to go in, but I'm also getting interviews from different jobs. So let's see what happens.
That's awesome. Congrats on getting into the program. I think another question is like, what inspired you to go into chemical engineering as a field? Like, what was your main inspiration behind like, pursuing that?
So, as a senior in high school, you will never really know what you want to do in the future. I'm sure when you go into college, there's many people who've changed their majors gazillion times,
I
and it's
did.
better,
Same.
yeah, see, and it's better to change your major rather than being stuck in something that you don't want to do. Rather, it's better to take that extra year
Mhm.
and switch your major. But for me, I was like, okay, I really love chemistry and I like math, but I don't want to be in the lab all day. That's what I think of when I think of a chemistry major. And that's true. I've seen all my chemistry friends become lab assistants and all that. I didn't want to go into bio because, yeah, I was interested in it, but it wasn't something that just like touched me. So, since senior year of high school, I ended up taking physics and I loved the critical thinking behind that. And from there, I was like, oh, math, physics, chem, an engineer. Wow, maybe I should do that. Yeah. But little did I know about chemical engineering. So it's very different from what you would expect.
That's super cool.
It's very intense.
Yeah, yeah.
So I like that you were saying how you didn't want to be in a lab because I was a biotech major and I just did not want to be in a lab. So I like that you figured that out. Like, okay, well, I can take my math and chemistry and put it together and be an
Yeah,
engineer.
That's ironic because I also worked as a chemistry lab stockroom assistant during my undergrad. And it's not that I didn't like it. Like it was fun. I gained a bunch of skills, but that also helped me like solidify the fact that I don't want to be doing this for the rest of my life. So
Can you talk more about that experience? Because I think it'd be super interesting to know like what you did during the lab experience, which kind of like made you like the engineering aspects and hands-on experience even more.
yeah, so I've taken many labs, undergraduate, like general chemistry labs. I've taken organic chemistry labs, and then I've taken unit operations laboratory. So that's a specific chemical engineering laboratory. So those are all the classes. And then I've also done my job, which was a chemical laboratory assistant. So I've worked on two different floors in Roland Hall at UCI. So that's our lab building for all the listeners who don't know. And one floor is specific for organic chemistry, which is what I ended up the floor that I ended up in. And then there's another floor specific for or upper division labs and has many different labs running. So through there, I got to learn a lot of techniques, like laboratory techniques, that I would not have learned because I was not taking any of those classes.
Mhm.
And the fact that I switched between two different floors allows me to gain even more because now it's a different like aspect of chemistry that I can learn from.
Right.
And then another part for my chemistry laboratory skills that I got through my lab, the unit operations lab, solidified that I wanted to be an engineer because of all the hands-on engineering that I did. Through those, I did many labs in different engineering topics, and it basically tied all the past 2 years. So I took it in my senior year, so my junior year and my sophomore year engineering courses and concepts together in a lab. So I saw them in action, and I was like, whoa, like connecting, and it was like mind blowing. So
So I
seeing
know
those
you had
reactions happen. Yeah.
like a capstone project for your like undergrad degree at UCI.
Mhm.
What type of experience did you gain with that?
Many positive experiences. So for that capstone project, it was my senior design. For chemical engineering, senior design is a little different than other engineers because I know BME, CEE, so BME is biomedical engineering, CEE is civil engineering. They're able to go and have a actual industry mentor. So you'll be partnered up with the actual company. And you might have been after graduating exit into that company or entry into that company. However, for chemical engineering, you can't do that because you can't really, I guess, perform a bunch of these un they could be unsafe if people or students don't know how
Right.
to perform these labs properly, so they can be unsafe. So we have to do or very costly. So we had to do our senior design project in 2 quarters. One quarter was to learn a design software called Pro 2 on the computer that basically designs the actual flow of the process that's going to happen. So the flow of the fluid that's going to go through, what equipment's going to go through. And then the second quarter, which was the senior year spring quarter, which turned everything online to make it slightly harder, but it was still manageable. We had to be on a team, and basically we were given specifications and guidelines, and we had to create a refinery type like crude oil distillation unit. So it's one unit that would be seen in a refinery.
Okay.
And we had to create that on the diagram on the software Pro 2, basically showing where the crude oil comes in, what equipment is being used. We had to specify the temperatures in each equipment. So if there were heat exchangers, we had to specify how many, what type. Um, there's different like equipment within it, aka sizings and stuff, how long you want it, how like diameter wide,
Mhm.
other design specifications that we had to do for those. And from there, I learned how the process worked and how engineers would go through this design process. And then those design choices have to be used through a cost analysis as well. So cost analysis basically shows if you were to use like a 30-foot, I don't know, distillation tower, how much would that cost versus two 20 feet, something like that, if you
Mhm.
can break it up. I mean, you can't actually break up distillation towers, so that's not correct example. But yeah, something like that. So you would basically go through all the steps that an engineer would do in a process like this when they were given a project. And it was really interesting to learn how to like the actual steps, how to put the design on Pro 2, make one with actual control designs. That's another design. I keep saying design, I know, I'm sorry. Design paper, like, or design map. So one just shows instruments, one shows it with controls and cost analysis. Basically, like all the steps. It was just really cool. It was very
I think it's super cool that you could do like basically implement what you learned in classes in a real life experience. And I think Meera and I also are getting that opportunity in our Caption project, which we have just started like last week at this point now.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it seems like a super immersive, even though it's like online and virtual, it seems like a really good experience and could really help for your job in the future. So,
Yeah, yeah, that would be very, very useful. It wasn't until senior year that all these classes
mhm.
came together though, so that was really cool.
That's super cool.
Yeah, so I bet I was gonna say I bet that really helps with your confidence because I think that one thing that lacks from some majors is you don't really get this immersive experience. So you're kind of thrown out there and you don't know what you're supposed to do. So that I'm thinking
Yeah,
capstone projects really help with that.
Agreed.
yeah, in to some degree, yeah, because then you're more, I guess, knowledgeable on the processes that happen, that take place in an engineer's life. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, so I guess another thing you might have mentioned was that you were taking a test for chemical engineering. So I was just going to ask, like, what are some areas that you're curious about in your field and like the steps you've taken for like researching or pursuing projects like you took the test? Is that something because you're curious about, or can you explain a little bit more of that?
So the the actual exam is for engineers, it's kind of a little confusing. I know for pharmacists, they would have to take a license exam at the end of their entire
Mhm.
grad school to become licensed in order to practice. But I
Right.
know if you're in the industry, you don't actually need that license to practice to because you're not physically giving meds, you know.
Mhm.
Well, for engineering, it's uh kind of similar, but not really, in a sense where once you get your bachelor's degree, you're an engineer. You can practice engineering.
Mhm.
However, with this exam, it's a two-part exam. So you take your fundamentals of engineering, your FE, in
What is it called?
whatever fundamentals of engineering,
Okay.
the FE exam, yeah. So you take that exam in whatever field you, I guess, got your degree in. I took mine in the chemical FE, and then after that, once you pass it, you apply for an EIT, which is an engineering in training. It's a certificate. It shows that you possess the knowledge in order to be basically an engineering training, this pathway to become a professional engineer. Yeah,
Okay.
so since you passed that chemical FE, or since I passed that chemical FE, I possess the knowledge to become a chemical engineer. Um, but what's tricky is after I get that, I need at least, I think it's like 3 years at least experience in professional or like professional grad school or actual industry experience. And then I need to take another exam for to become a PE, a professional engineer. But that isn't as specific as a civil test, a chemical test. It could be in more industry based, as in there's a process controls test. They probably do have ones of chemical engineers. I haven't fully looked into the exact ones I want to take because
Okay.
I'm not that far. But yeah, they do have more specific tests like that. Then once you become a PE, what you can do with that is it is obviously good pay bump, you know, who
Mhm.
doesn't want that? But you can sign off on designs in the actual plants that you work in,
Okay.
saying that you acknowledge that this is a safe and coherent design, it will work well. And if you just come out with a bachelor's, you won't be able to be in managerial positions like that.
Okay.
That's kind of like the difference. And most chemies don't take this exam, but it's needed for civil engineers when they want to go into wastewater and others. So civil engineers, mechanical engineers, they take this more, but chemies don't really need it.
I think that's super cool because it's kind of giving you an upper hand, especially in applying for jobs during the pandemic. And I kind of
Yeah.
definitely can relate to you on the fact that so I entered UCI as an electrical engineering major and changed to like business information management and informatics. But I think I definitely didn't know about this exam earlier, and I think it's a pretty good opportunity for people to gain like an upper hand and kind of get a better insight into applying for jobs as well later on. I think
Yeah, I didn't know about this earlier either until I went to a career info session. So
That's super cool. I think Sam, you kind of got this advice at a career fair. So, what is some advice which you would want to give to someone who is trying to go into chemical engineering? Something which you might have received or something you kind of might have experienced during your time at UCI. Like, what is something which you would want to advise them with?
So, for me, something that really was beneficial to go through at least school, and then that would help me later on to grasp the knowledge was during my senior year of high school, I was kind of thrown into physics C, which is the calculus-based physics, without learning any other physics or any calculus. Like I didn't have the math needed for it or any physics, but I was thrown into this class, and I stayed in this class. Like, yeah, I got C's, or I guess a B because of a project, but still, like I still did really bad. I didn't pass the AP test, but going through that, I'm realized that the skills I gained in that class, it was taught by a newly graduated Berkeley professor, and so he said, whenever you do any physics or engineering type problems, you have to write out the math, but in symbol form. And that's like you first hear this and you're like, what does that mean? Basically, if you're doing pi r squared, right? Like the area of a circle, if
Mhm.
you're using formulas like that, you want to isolate the variable that you're looking for with variable. So you would have to isolate r in that formula. So if you're looking for the radius with the symbols, and then you plug in all the numbers. And most people don't know this, and most people don't do this. That's what I've learned when I went through college. And that's something that's very, very, very useful when you're actually going through your bachelor's because you go through the math so much. You might know like a number here and there, and then
Mhm.
if you already multiply them, by the time you get to the answer and you get an incorrect answer, you don't know what's causing that inconsistency. But
Right.
if you have the entire letters written out, you can compare it with the student, be like, how did you do this versus what I did? Where did you mess up on the math? So
That's
that's
super
one big thing
interesting.
that I did. Another thing that I am still trying to learn to do is how to apply these chemical engineering um, topics, I guess, practically.
Okay.
So into the real world, that comes a little more difficult to me. I had a friend who was really, really good at that, whereas I was good at the math part right there, you know? So if somebody tells you how, I guess, refrigerator works, if you take that same sort of mechanism behind it and try to think what else works that same way, I can't easily apply that to a different machinery, you know? Whereas if you can, that will also benefit you. But that's not something that you can learn really quickly, but it's something that you
Right.
can try to gain or try to, I guess, teach yourself as you go through the class. And nobody taught me that. But if
Okay.
I were to, then I would try to do that. I wouldn't know how, so maybe it would need a little more guidance. But
That's a pretty good point.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned like just doing your math in an organized way. Like I think, yeah, things could get really messy, and like by one time you're not even gonna know what you're doing anymore. So it's a good point.
yeah, even with the symbols, sometimes it gets that far, so it'd
Yeah.
be even more crazy with just numbers.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to go off of that. Sorry, the last point that you made about like going, not really knowing how to extend your thought process on, like you were mentioning. Sorry, like the mechanisms of one thing and seeing how to
Try
connect
to,
it to something else.
okay, yeah.
Um, so like, I guess how would you go about that? Like, is there a way, like maybe researching methods online? Like, I don't know, like personally, like for our field in data science, if I need to understand how something works in something else, I just read articles and like try to figure it out that way. Do you have any like advice on how to do it in your field?
I'm still trying to learn that, so
Mm-hmm.
I personally don't know as much. But I know for my friend who can do it really well, it's because he's just been so knowledgeable about all these. Like he knows a lot about how they work. So whenever he is taught a process, he's like, "Oh, it's similar to this." But I'm not really sure like, "Oh, this is how like the water goes through
Mm-hmm.
the fridge to go
Mhm.
to the ice
Yeah,
machine." Like, you know.
so that's relatable, honestly.
Yeah.
I think
But
another
yeah.
question which would be like super interesting to know about is like, you kind of said like you have some influences in your life, you kind of, and you spoke about your like teacher in physics and stuff. But I think can you like talk about like how you someone like the people and like kind of the influences you had to decide your specialization, your like you said you had a specialization in your major, like what kind of influenced you to go to that, like any people or like experiences or such?
Well, I'm gonna backtrack a little if you don't mind, back to what
Yeah.
influenced me to get into Chem E. So it was actually that physics professor
Okay.
because I guess he pushed me to stay in the
Mm.
AP physics class, but I had no physics background or any calculus. But he was like, he came to me, I remember, at the beginning of my second semester, because my school was semesters back then, and it was like,
Okay.
I have all the people that were in the first semester, I was hoping at least you would stay because I still see potential in you
Oh, wow.
to go
That's
through
super
this.
encouraging.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's
it
super
was
encouraging.
very encouraging, and even though like I wasn't doing well, he would always like show my lab reports to me and be like, "This is what you could have done better." And then I remember the very first homework assignment in the very first quarter or semester. I came to him and I was like, "I don't know how to do this," because it was calculus based. It was as simple as power rule, but I hadn't learned it yet in my
Mm.
AB calc. Because even now in cal or physics C for universities, they would need you to pass the derivative based calculus
Mm.
before going into it. But I was in that class. So he was like, if you ever need math, I will teach you. And after that, he would always like try to teach me the math. If he knew that there was math in there that he knew that I didn't learn, because he was also teaching that AP math or AB class, calculus AB, he would pull
Right.
me aside and be like, here, let me teach you this so you know how to do it. And so I guess that and him showing how to go through the math through symbols also pushed me, because then I was like, wow, when I backtracked later in life, I was like, I guess that was the reason, because if I'd never taken that physics class, I probably wouldn't have gotten into engineering. And so then to answer your question about the specialization, it was, I think I needed electives and I was going through the electives that I wanted, and the electives that I like to take most nearly fit in that specialization. So then I was
Okay.
like, I might as well finish the specialization. So it wasn't a professor or a person, it was mainly classes that interested me.
Okay. That's super cool.
Yeah, it's really inspiring actually to hear that your professor kind of pushed you along and you took that through your entire career so far. That's nice.
Yeah, I actually didn't realize that until getting this degree. I was like, wow, I guess that was the go getter, like pusher.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's always that one
Thank
professor who
you.
kind of like inspires us all to go. And I think it's super, like I think our teachers kind of inspire us to kind of push ourselves to do our best, and that's I think that's been a huge constant in all of our lives, I guess.
Hopefully, there are some students who don't get that, and
Mhm.
not, yeah, it's not fair to them, but
So since we've talked a lot about your educational background, I guess we can move on to like what your job search has been so far with the COVID pandemic and just like how that's going.
um, so for me, I personally wouldn't say that it's going as well as I wanted.
Mm.
I don't hear back from many people. Um, it's much easier to, I guess, hear back from somebody if you have a connection.
Mm.
Uh-huh.
And I don't have many of those connections. So I haven't heard back from many people, which is why I decided just to go straight back into school to
Mhm.
pursue an MS degree. And I recently applied to USC and I got my acceptance like a week ago or something. So that was that.
Okay.
And yeah, and then I applied to two other schools, and so waiting on that. But I do have an interview next week, so we're hoping for the best.
Well, congrats on your acceptance and good luck on your interview. That's really
Yeah.
exciting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Um, yeah, that's actually super interesting. So, in terms, I think kind of just going off what you said. So, do you think, how do you think your master's degree is going to, like, I think for us also, I had a similar situation. Like, I went directly into master's directly after graduating because also, and a huge reason for that was the COVID pandemic. So, I think I had a similar situation with you that I mean, I graduated with you. We were in the same class. So,
Yeah.
yeah. But I think what's super interesting is that uh, a lot of people from grad school, like even right now, I'm an MSB ambassador. So when we had interview, we were kind of interviewing some people for the program and kind of seeing like what if they want to join and stuff. Most of them said that they wouldn't want to join during the COVID pandemic. And the thing is like, yeah, it's been tough online, but it's not been that bad. Like it's been a lot. more interactive. Like I have never met Meera in person ever till now. I think I'm still able to like work with her on homework and stuff. And we have a good friendship at this point. Like I can talk to her about classes and like it's been pretty good. So I think if you do end up going to grad school at USC, you'll have a really good experience there too.
I hope
So
so. I'm trying to go because it would be for the fall, so it would
Mm,
be not remote. I want to go in person.
that's the hope. Even even all the UCs have said that hopefully by the fall things will be in person. So hoping for the best. But stay at home and wear mask, guys.
yeah.
Yes. But that's really
Uh,
cool how you guys like, I guess, met through a remote, starting like
yeah,
a grad school remotely,
great
met
experience
through
for
it
sure.
somehow, because I know you're probably on a Zoom call with just a bunch of random people and somehow
Yeah.
became friends, and now you guys are doing a podcast. So that's really, really cool.
I know. I was just gonna say we've never met. We're doing a podcast together, so it's a successful friendship.
Yeah, I agreed.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it. I've seen it
So
for this
kind of
past
going
like
off
30
what you just
minutes.
said. Yeah, we're almost done. We're almost done. So kind of just going off what you said. I think the last question I asked you was like some advice that you had. Now, do you have any like set of skills which you think an every chemical engineer should possess, and maybe like what they should work on building up more? Like the one thing which you said was trying to convert like math into simple language for people to understand. So something like anything more which you want to say about, and then we can probably wrap up.
Yeah, no, I wasn't trying to rush you. I was just saying, I saw you guys as friends. I've just seen you guys together for 35 minutes and saw a good friendship. That's what I was saying the time for. But yeah, to answer your question, a lot of it is a lot of problem solving and critical thinking. Like going from senior year to my first year of college, where I just took a bunch of like chem, gen, math, all
Mm,
those like general classes that you probably would have taken part of them as APs in high school,
right. Right.
to going to my first engineering class. We all hit a snag that year because we had not learned how to think like an
Mm,
engineer yet.
Okay.
So that first year would be very difficult for a chemical engineer if they get really, I guess, down about that they're not getting good grades. Like I didn't do so well that year or that semester because you just don't know how to think like an engineer. You don't know how to, I guess, critically think. That's like a very, very big skill that you would need to grasp. You need to think of issues that are occurring, I guess, in a process, like why a process isn't giving you the components that you need with the correct compositions, or why a machine is not, I guess, acting the way you want to do it. You guys are both, you guys know code, right? So
Yeah.
guess I'll talk to you about this in coding. If you guys are trying to run a code and it's not working, you guys have to go through the code, right, to
mhm.
figure out what
Yeah.
the issue is.
Correct.
It's kind of like the same thing. You guys have to critically think through it and figure out what part of the process is not working, right?
Mhm.
And in order for you to do that, you need to learn the concepts behind it. And so something that I think engineers should have is that problem solving skill, that critical thinking skill, be able to think at every step of the way what should be happening and what is happening in this process, and be able to, I guess, take a problem because it's going to be different from doing textbook problems to actually applying it. There's
Completely
always
agree.
going to be a
Right.
mismatch. So for actually applying, it should be knowing that problem solving skills. It's also the same for textbooks, I guess, but it's just going to be applied differently. So yeah, I guess to wrap that up, it would be a lot of problem solving, critical thinking. There are more, but that's what I got highlighted out of my undergrad.
That's a pretty good point. Where can like our listeners reach you and connect with you online if they want to reach out to you for more any questions or advice?
I am on LinkedIn. I actually forgot my LinkedIn username,
The
but
LinkedIn
it's just,
URL will be in our description of
Mhm.
the podcast. So yeah,
yeah,
Yeah.
I'll give that LinkedIn URL to you guys. But this
Yeah.
was very fun. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much for joining us. You give a lot of good insights into your field.
thank you so much
Yeah,
for your time. And I think it's always great fun talking to you, Vrunda. For context, she is my friend
yeah,
from
thank you.
freshman year, so it's been a really good experience talking with her about her career and stuff.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you
Always
guys.
fun talking to you and nice meeting you, Mira, the
Yeah,
first
nice
time.
meeting you too.
Uh,
That was fun.
well, thank you guys for listening and hope you have a good day.
See you next time.
Yeah, see you guys.